Hi, 7th graders. Today I'm here to show you how to kind of give you the basics of how to work with watercolor. And watercolor is kind of a misunderstood media because people have had an experience with it in elementary school where everything kind of puddled together and made a mess and they weren't happy with the outcome. So a lot of watercolor is learning to control watercolor. First thing we're going to do, though, is kind of look at our paints here and work out a little color wheel so that you know how to mix some colors. So the first thing I do is I just drop a little drop of water. Doesn't have, not very much. Just a little water on all my colors because they're new and they're kind of hard in the case, and this will let them soften a little bit. So while we're letting them soften a little bit, I'm going to draw, and I want you to, at the top of your page, let's make a triangle. It doesn't have to be fancy, kind of an equilateral triangle, equal sides. And I'm going to put a circle on each one of these. Now, does anybody remember what the primary colors are? And you can write that over here. Primary colors. I'll give you a chance to think. Primary colors are the ones that all other colors are made from. And they are red, yellow, and blue. So I'm going to start with yellow. And I'm going to put a little yellow up here. It doesn't have to be perfect, just kind of do my little yellow triangle. And then I'm going to go down to the left side. Now with watercolor, you want to use water because watercolor is meant to be transparent. It's meant to be see-through. So it should never look thick and gooey. Red on the left, we're going down to a little more water in there. If you're not sure how your watercolor looks, you can use the lid, or you have the little palette to mix with. And I'm going to put my blue over here. So that gets me started with my primary colors. And like I said, they should look kind of see-through. Now I'm going to kind of carefully draw another triangle upside down. So these are the primaries. Do you remember what the next group of colors are called? The ones that are in between these? They're called secondary. Secondary colors. They are the colors you get when you mix two primaries together. So we're going to do that rather than use all the colors here. I'm going to ask you to just use red, yellow, and blue for today. So now with watercolor, to keep your paints nice and clean, make sure you're swishing your brush out before you move to another color. I'm going to start with red, a little bit of red here, and that's one of my primaries. So my spot over here is, I'm going to add yellow to it and make orange. So I'll just put that there. Now, while you're there, there's a third group of colors. We'll come back to our other two secondaries. This is the first group. This is the second group. And the third group is, we call them tertiaries, or intermediate, meaning they're between other colors, intermediate. And those tertiaries, or intermediate colors, are the ones in between the other colors that once we have all of our 6 primary and secondaries on there. But the easiest way to make those, well, I'm going to go back, because I think I'm not teaching you that right. Let's go ahead and get our secondary colors on there. So we'll do red and blue together. I know a little more blue in that one. We're looking for a very balanced purple, one that doesn't look too Now I've got too much blue in it. There, that's better. So I'm going to put my purple there. Don't get mixed up and put your circles in the wrong place. It's easy to do. And then yellow and blue, what do they make? Oops. Oh, I went to green there. We're going to get yellow and blue. I think I need a little more yellow. Remember to swish that brush in between colors. And yellow and blue make green. So there's a green. Now I'm going to go back to this intermediate or tertiary colors, the ones in between. When you have the colors mixed up over here, you can adjust them to make these intermediates. So orange and yellow go together and make yellow-orange. You always name the colors with the primary colors named first and the secondary colors named second. And I always say they're a mix. Yellow and orange had a kid, and it's yellow-orange as its name. Now, yellow-orange is an orange, but it's a little more yellow than this orange. So I'm going to take yellow and add to my mix over here. Maybe a little bit more. I don't want it to look yellow. Don't want it to look orange either. So I'm going to try to go for in between. And there's my yellow-orange. Now I'm going to do the same thing with red-orange. It's going to be between red and orange. Now I've got a lot of yellow in mine, so I'm going to go back to the red here and add a lot of red, and then I'll have to adjust it with some yellow to get it looking the way I want. Oop, more than that though. So it should look orangey, but not as orange as your orange. So it'll be kind of in between those two colors. Now on the screen, it kind of looks purple. I don't know if it will look that way to you or not, but it's kind of a red-orange. So we just keep going like that. I have a purple. I've got a pretty big puddle of purple here. So I'm going to add red to one end of it, just so I can mix up enough to make my color wheel color, which is red-violet. And we call purple violet because that's the way the color wheel labels them. So our violet, and then I'm going to take more blue and put into this end of my purple. Kind of see the difference there in the three of them. So this is a blue-violet. It almost needs a little bit more in it, maybe just a little. Nice thing about watercolor, while it's still wet, you can put a little more in there. And then let's do our greens. So I'll do yellow-green first. Putting yellow into the green that we already made. Feel free to stop the video if you need to. I might put a little more yellow in that. And I can just touch that and kind of drop it in there. Ooh, I like that. Kind of a lime color. And then from our green, we will add more blue. And this is going to be, and it might take a little more blue than that, kind of a blue-green. So basically those tertiary or intermediate colors are colors that lean towards the primary that they're closest to. Like blue-green kind of is a green, but it kind of leans towards blue. So there's our color wheel. You can go around and label it if you want. There's yellow, red, blue, violet, red-violet, blue-violet, and so forth. You can label them all the way around. So now I want to show you some ways that you can control watercolor a little bit. You have a lot of brushes, and I'm going to show you the difference in some of these. I'm just using a little round brush today, and that's probably going to work for most of the things we're doing. If you need to lay a bigger area of color called a wash, you might need a bigger flat brush to make it a large area. These are called Filberts. not sure why, but they are called filberts with the rounded ends. There's a couple of those. But this brush, the round brushes, are going to be the most useful to you, and you want to keep them nice and keep them washed out and make sure they come to a nice point when you put them away. Okay, so we have our color wheel. We've reviewed that a little bit, and we know how to mix colors. Obviously, you have colors here, but you can also take those colors and adjust them so they don't look like right out of this. So here's a purple from the box, but we can adjust it. Like, maybe I think that purple is just too bright for what I want. I'm going to put it on here a little bit. If I think it's too bright, I can tone it down a little bit. I can do that by putting the opposite color on the color wheel, a little bit of it into it. So if we have violet, purple, and we go across the color wheel, we have yellow as its complementary color. So if I take a little bit of yellow, not very much, and put into my purple, it's going to make a less vivid purple, a little duller purple. And you can do that with any colors that are across the color wheel that are complementary. If you have a really bright red, like that, and what you really need is maybe an old barn red, like it's weathered out a bit. If you take green, and then I did a little too much green probably, but I'm going to go get a little more red and put in there. You can make a color that is a little toned down by putting those complements in. I'm going to put the bright red next to it so you can see the difference. So those are called tones. And those are subdued colors. They're not as bright. Now the other thing we need to know how to do is lighten and darken colors. So when you are painting with watercolor, you, with any paint, you have what are called tints and shades. Now, with watercolor, tints and shades, a shade usually means a darker version of the color. A tint means a lighter version of the color. So, since this is watercolor, how would you make a lighter version of the color? Well, I'm going to take purple again, since we've got a light, bright purple here. I need to clean my palette out a little bit, I think. I have room for mixing. Well, I guess I can use my round one here. Kind of nice to have a paper towel handy when you're painting. So I'm going to take my purple. I'm going to put it on pretty much full strength here first. So this is a pretty bright, deep, dark purple when it dries. Now, to make it lighter, what do I do? Well, I add a little more water to it. Now, they may look pretty similar right now. Nope, that actually looks lighter when I look at the screen. I'm going to take a little more water and add to it again. And a little more water and add to it again. Those look pretty similar. And one more time so we can get it a little paler. So with watercolor, you just add more of the water to get it to be lighter and darker. Now, when you start working with watercolor, I'm going to draw I'll just draw a little flower shape here. I'm just going to make a real simple little flower shape with like 5 petals. And maybe I'll make it have a little center. I'm drawing really lightly because I don't want my pencil to show up a lot in the end. Hopefully you can see that a little bit. And I'm going to make the petals pink. So what do I need to do if I'm making the petals pink? Well, another thing you're going to notice is your water gets looking really bad. So if your water gets dark, you may have to get some fresh water so that it doesn't foul up your colors. All right, so I'm going to start with some red and quite a bit of water in it. Like I said, I could do it over here. It'd probably show up a little better. So I want a pink. So basically, I'm just going to paint with a lot of water with a little bit of red, and I'm going to kind of stain the paper. Just going to be kind of careful with it. Now the key with watercolor is letting the watercolor get dry when you need it, when you need to be able to add more to it. Because if you put something into wet watercolor, to put another color into wet watercolor, you get a wet in wet effect or a bleed. Sometimes I'll show you what happens. This is kind of fun. You can try that while your flower or whatever you made is drying. I'm just going to put a little water over here, and sometimes this can be a really good thing to have. I'm just going to drop some color into it. Oh, look at that. Let's try some yellow. That didn't spread as much. Do a little blue. So when you put wet into a wet area, you're going to have that spreading. If you don't want it to spread, then you need to kind of patiently wait for it to dry. I'm going to let that dry a little bit and come back to it. Oops, see, there's some of my yellow kind of crept into my petals, but we'll go with it. It'll be okay for right now. So I'll let that dry. While I'm doing that, I'm going to get out my bigger flat brush, this one. I'm going to wet it, and I'm going to make a little sky. Now, with watercolor, you don't have white. You have, I'm going to draw where I'm going to put my little scene here. You don't have white, so what do you do so that you have white? You keep some of the paper white. So say I wanted a blue sky with clouds. I need to change my water because it's getting kind of yucky. But if I want a blue sky with clouds, I'm going to mix up some blue here, not make it too dark. Now I'm going to use that wet in wet technique up here to help me with this. So I'm going to wet my brush, and where I'm going to do my little scene, I'm going to wet the whole sky. You can see it'll look shiny. And then I'm going to take my little round brush that I had before and go in and drop in some blue, but leave some areas be white for my clouds. And it kind of spreads out and gives you soft edges like clouds have, so they look more real. Kind of pretty, huh? Okay, so we'll let that dry a bit too. Now, I should have brought my hair dryer over here because I could speed dry this. I think the one petal is dry enough that I can show you. So now, to get some detail into this, I can go back with a little bit darker pink. Just means my red and a little less water. And because this is dry now, I think it's going to be too bright. I'm going to test it here a little bit. Yeah, that's okay. I'm going to brush some texture into my petals. I'm going to turn it here a little bit to be able to do this. See, because they're dry, they're not dry in the middle here, so it'll probably do something funny. But because they're dry, I can paint details over it. So here, I can soften that out and make it so it blends a little bit with a little bit of water on my brush. And I wish I'd waited and didn't put that yellow in right away. I could have done that later. It would have been so much better. But the beauty of it is that you can put some detail onto something and let it dry. Now, my clouds sort of ran together over here. If you have a tissue, works better. I have a paper towel handy and then use that. And I can blot up some of those places that maybe don't look quite the way I wanted them to. So I'm going to let my sky dry. In the meantime, I'm going to draw something with Sharpie, because the wonderful thing about Sharpie and watercolor is if you draw something, and I would probably draw it with pencil first, but for the sake of hurrying here, I'm going to kind of draw it, just wing it. So this is going to, we'll do a little pumpkin here. This is an easy way to draw a little pumpkin. Make it look kind of real. Now, the nice thing about drawing with Sharpie is that that's permanent. It shouldn't affect our drawing any. So first thing I'm going to do, when you put some color on and just leave it, so you're going to come back and do some detail over it, it's called a wash. We're just going to wash some, I think I might mix a little yellow in this. This could be pretty. Yeah, I like that. So I'm just going to wash some orange, yellow over my pumpkin. Now notice I'm doing it on dry paper. I can have a little more control of it. Because over here, wet went everywhere. But that's good sometimes. It just depends on what you're making. All right, so I'm going to let that dry a little bit. And I'll come back here to my flower. I've decided that I can make this a little better. I go in and edge out my... See, that wasn't dry yet. That's the key with watercolor. Let it dry, or get a hair dryer and speed up your drying process. But a paper towel can kind of save the day there. Do a couple little... My flower's kind of getting a little texture to the petals. A little more interesting looking than just plain. Now you let that dry, I can go back and paint the background. But like I said, if I do it while it's wet, it's going to give me trouble. I kind of like the way that's turning out. Okay, so this needs to dry faster. And this is almost dry. So since it's almost dry, I'll just blot it a little. So now I can put some grass down here below. And I'm going to mix up a grass because I don't think that green looks like what I want real grass to look at. I might use some of that green in it. But let's put some yellow and make it prettier. All right, so I'm still a little wet there. See what happened? But you know what? I can pretend those are little trees off in the distance, so it's okay. I'm like Bob Ross, happy little trees. So, kind of looks like trees, don't you think? While that's drying. So, see, you have to kind of be patient with watercolor. You have to let things dry a bit before you go back and do something else to it. So that's why it's kind of nice to have a couple little things that I'm working on. So I can go back and forth between them and kind of show you how. That's a big tree back there. Make it a little darker. I kind of like that. See? Happy accident. Sometimes things work out well. So we just have some trees off in the distance that look kind of fuzzy. That's called aerial perspective, and we'll learn more about that when we work with acrylics. Okay, so I'm going to let that dry. I'm trying to blow on that because I wanted to kind of shade the pumpkin for you a little bit. Well, and like I said, if you happen to have a hairdryer around, you could dry it so that you can get it done a little faster. You can blot things and end up with a little texture in them. That's okay, too. Okay, so let's pretend that just dried. And then we can go back. I'm going to use the orange. But I'm going to make it darker orange. Maybe add a little brown to it or something. Because I want to shade my pumpkin a little bit to give it some dimension. I don't know if I like that color. That's a little bit dark. A little more orange in it. Okay, so hopefully this is dry enough. Normally you won't blot it, you'll just wait a little bit. So I'm going to kind of go where my little outlines of the ribs of the pumpkin are. And just kind of put a little shading line around those. And then I can go back like I did with the petals. Kind of make my brush not too wet. And just soften that outer edge a little bit. Make it blend in a little bit. Okay, so let that dry. Well, I might do a little bit here on the stem real quick. Okay, I'm still waiting on my little landscape over here to dry a little bit. So I'm going to put some green. I'll mix a little blue in it. Let's get creative with the color a little bit. Green's opposite is red, so if I add a little red, I can get a little deeper green. Notice I'm not using a lot of black. Black watercolor tends to be just too black and kind of not pretty. Let's see. Oops, see, there I got my watercolor's dirty. You don't want to do that. I'll wipe it out. Oop. Good to keep some tissues handy. Okay, so I'm going to go in here and kind of paint a leaf very carefully around my petals there. And maybe I'll do a couple more here. With watercolor, you also want to work light to dark. You want to paint your lightest colors first, and then go back with your darker colors to cover them, because they will. Well, let's do one leaf up here too. And see, I'm just painting around. Yeah, I like that. Okay, so I'm going to let those leaves dry, and then I'll come back to do a little detail on them. Okay, I think over here's dry enough that I can play around a little bit here and show you how I might paint a tree. Now for this one, I'm going to use the black, but I'm going to add a little brown and darken it, and some water to get it more of a grayer color. All right, so I can plant a tree here. So I'm just going to, because this is dry, I can go in. I need a little more water in that, I think. And with a pointy brush, you can just pull that tree right up. Maybe we'll make it a fall tree. A little bit here. Now some of it is, don't press way down. See how I'm just barely touching with the tip of the brush. So some of it is how you touch the brush onto the paper. It's going to let you get skinnier little branches out there at the ends. Yes, let's thicken it up a little bit. Make this tree sturdy. And you have some littler brushes. You can use them as well. But you still have to, if you want them get them thinner, you have to touch them lightly on there. Now sometimes I need to turn my paper. I just can't paint it that direction. So so I don't put my hand in my watercolor, I'm going to may run into some wet spots here because I didn't wait too long because I'm trying to do this demo for you. And I'll put a couple over here. It's a little tree. I can post you a video that'll help you with trees if you're interested in that. Let's make this one a really pretty fall tree. So again, now I'm going to have to be kind of careful because my branches are still wet. But I'm just going to put some golden colors out here. Not worry about it too much. If we get some darks in it, it's okay. If you don't want that to happen, then wait a little bit or use the hairdryer, like I said. I want it to look like it's getting bare, so I'm going to not make it a lollipop tree. I'm going to just add some little leaves everywhere. And let's do a little bit of red too. Oh, yeah, like that. Now they're blending together a little bit, so we're getting a little glowing color there. And if the leaves were falling off, we'd probably have some leaves down here on the ground too. I have to put some bright yellow ones on there since it's green. So you get the drift of how to do that. Now, my trees back there in the back, I think I'd like them to be a little darker. So I'm going to just a little brown and maybe make them look a little fallish back there. See, I'm just putting it on kind of thin like there. So it looks like I have little woods off in the distance. And if you wanted to, you could make it in fall colors. Put some oranges and yellows into it. Whatever you like. So now I think you see how it is kind of fun to play with watercolor. I'll go back here. I think these might be dry enough. You can tell when they're dry. I may have, like I said, I've hurried it a bit, but I'm going to make some dark green here. Be careful when you use black. Put just a little in. And then I'm just going to paint some little veins on my leaves. Oops, not too much paint. Just like that. So the key is draw something first and then just try to control it a little bit and wait on it to dry. And so today, play around with watercolor. Please make a color wheel and then try some painting and then post that to me at the end of the class. When you finish up, you can take this like to a faucet and just kind of, without getting your paints wet, you can run it under there and clean that all up. Same with your palette. And I will see you later. Bye.